The White Feather. The morning mist hung thick over Firebase Charlie when Staff Sergeant Marcus Whitefeather Williams first laid eyes on the PSG1 sniper rifle that would change everything. The other Rangers had already nicknamed it Firm Sight, not out of respect, but mockery. The precision German rifle looked pristine, almost clinical compared to their battle-worn M24s. Williams had earned his call sign from a single white hawk feather he kept tucked behind his helmet band, a gift from his Cherokee grandmother. She told him stories about warriors who carried pieces of the sky with them, reminders that every shot carried the weight of the wind and the wisdom of ancestors. Now, holding this unfamiliar weapon in the pre-dawn darkness, he felt the weight of 18 lives depending on his ability to master it in less than 6 hours. Captain Rodriguez had been blunt during the briefing, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The situation was dire. Bravo Company pinned down in a dried riverbed, enemy snipers controlling the high ground, weather grounding air support. Firebase Charlie's mountain valley had become a killing field, and conventional solutions were off the table. Intelligence says Bravo Company walked into a kill zone 3 clicks northeast, Rodriguez had said, his finger tracing lines on the tactical map. 18 men pinned down in a dried riverbed, surrounded on 3 sides. Air support's grounded due to fog, and artillery can't get a clean angle without risking our own people. The captain had paused, studying the map with tired eyes that spoke of too many impossible decisions. The enemy's got at least 4 sniper teams in elevated positions, picking off anyone who moves. We need to neutralize those shooters before we can extract our people. When Rodriguez handed Williams the PSG1, the room fell silent. Sergeant First Class Thompson barely suppressed a snort, his skepticism obvious. "Sir, with respect, why not stick with what works? Williams knows his M24 inside and out. This German rifle, it's got different ballistics, different scope markings. We're asking him to learn a new instrument in the middle of a symphony." But Rodriguez's expression hadn't wavered, because this rifle came with something special, pre-calculated range cards for this exact terrain, courtesy of a German advisor who spent 2 weeks mapping every elevation and wind pattern in our sector before rotating home. The M24's proven, but this PSG1 is already zeroed for the shots Williams needs to make today. Williams accepted the weapon without comment, feeling its unfamiliar grip and different balance point. The scope was indeed different. Cleaner glass, crisper reticle markings. Attached to the stock was a waterproof pouch containing detailed range cards written in precise German handwriting. As he studied those cards by flashlight in the corner of the briefing room, Williams realized someone had done months of mathematical work to account for the specific atmospheric conditions of their mountain valley. The German advisor's notes were meticulous, almost obsessive. Every wind pattern, every temperature variation, every subtle shift in humidity had been calculated and recorded. Williams found himself wondering about this unknown soldier. What kind of man spent weeks alone in these mountains, measuring angles and calculating trajectories for battles he'd never fight? "Move out in 15, Rodriguez called. "Jenkins, you're Williams' spotter. Get to Hill 247 and save our people." As Williams shouldered the PSG1 and checked his gear one final time, he touched the white feather behind his helmet band. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. "Every tool has its purpose, grandson. Sometimes the answer comes from unexpected places." Today, that answer would come written in German mathematics and carried by Cherokee patience. If stories like this make you question what you do in someone else's boots, tell us in the comments how you imagine you'd react in this situation. And stay with us for the next chapters. By 0800 hours, Williams and Corporal Jenkins had reached their overwatch position on Hill 247. The climb through the mountain terrain had been treacherous, made worse by the thick fog that continued to blanket the valley below. Through their binoculars, they could see the trapped Rangers in the dried riverbed, pressed against the far bank like scattered leaves after a storm. 3 bodies lay motionless in the open ground, soldiers who'd tried to move during the night and paid the ultimate price. The sight sent a chill through Williams that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Those men had families, dreams, letters they'd never finish writing. The enemy snipers remained invisible, but their muzzle flashes during the night had given Jenkins enough information to plot approximate positions. 4 shooters, just like intelligence said, Jenkins whispered, sketching positions on his notepad with steady hands. 2 in that rocky outcrop at 11 o'clock, 1 in the tree line at 2 o'clock, and 1 in what looks like a camouflaged hide at 10 o'clock. Range to the closest target is 620 meters. Williams consulted the German range cards, his fingers tracing the precise calculations. The morning breeze was steady from the southwest at approximately 8 miles per hour, exactly as the German advisor had predicted for this time of day. According to the cards, Williams needed to adjust 2 clicks left and 1 click up from his 0. The mathematical precision was remarkable, almost unsettling. As he made the adjustments to the PSG1 scope, Williams found himself thinking about the man who'd created these calculations. The handwriting was careful, methodical, the work of someone who understood that precision meant the difference between life and death. Had this German soldier known his work might one day save American lives? Or had he simply been doing his job, calculating variables with the same dedication Williams brought to his own duties? "Range cards are spot on," Jenkins murmured, studying the enemy positions through his spotting scope. This German knew his business. Williams nodded, settling into his shooting position. The PSG1 felt different against his shoulder, the stock slightly longer, the trigger pull subtly different from his familiar M24. But as he looked through the scope's crystal-clear glass, he began to understand why Rodriguez had insisted on this weapon. The German engineering was flawless, designed for exactly this type of precision shooting. Below in the riverbed, one of the trapped rangers raised his head slightly, trying to assess their situation. Immediately, a rifle crack echoed across the valley, and the soldier ducked back down as dirt exploded inches from his position. The enemy snipers were good, disciplined, patient, deadly. "They're keeping our guys pinned tight," Jenkins observed. "Can't move without drawing fire." Williams studied the tactical situation, weighing his options. The German range cards didn't just provide ballistic data. They included detailed terrain analysis, noting dead spaces, concealed routes, and optimal firing positions. It was intelligence gathered through painstaking observation, the kind of professional competence that transcended national boundaries. "First target?" Jenkins asked quietly. Williams considered the options. The sniper in the tree line offered the best angle for an escape route, but he was also the most concealed. The rocky outcrop provided clearer shots, but better cover for the enemy. The camouflaged hide remained a mystery, invisible until revealed by muzzle flash. "Tree line first," Williams decided. "If we can open that eastern route, our guys have a chance to move." As he prepared for the shot that would begin the engagement, Williams felt the weight of the white feather against his helmet. His grandmother had taught him that every action rippled outward like stones dropped in still water. Today, those ripples would determine whether 18 Rangers went home to their families or joined the 3 bodies already lying in the open ground. The German calculations had brought him to this moment. Now, Cherokee patience would see him through it. The first shot came at 8:23 hours. Williams had chosen the sniper in the tree line, reasoning that eliminating him would give the trapped Rangers a potential escape route toward the eastern ridge. The PSG1 bucked against his shoulder with a different recoil impulse than his familiar M24, but the German rifle's ballistic calculations proved perfect. Through the scope, Williams watched the distant figure crumple and fall, but the remaining enemy snipers immediately began scanning for his position. In the deadly mathematics of counter-sniper warfare, Williams and Jenkins had perhaps 90 seconds before return fire forced them to relocate. Working with mechanical precision born from countless hours of training, Williams engaged the 2 shooters in the rocky outcrop. The second shot dropped one instantly. The third shot wounded the other, who crawled behind cover but was effectively neutralized. 2 down, 1 wounded, 1 remaining. The fourth sniper proved more cunning. As Williams searched for the camouflaged hide that had remained invisible throughout the engagement, Jenkins spotted the telltale glint of a scope aimed directly at their position. "Shooter! 11 o'clock! He's got us ranged!" Jenkins called out urgently. Williams swung the PSG1 left, found the target and fired in the same motion. The German rifle's smooth bolt action allowed him to cycle and fire again before the enemy sniper could complete his shot. The threat vanished and silence settled over the valley like a held breath. Jenkins's radio crackled with the voice of Bravo Company's trapped platoon leader. "Overwatch, this is Bravo 6. We're seeing movement. Are we clear to move?" "Bravo 6, this is Overwatch," Jenkins responded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline. "All 4 threats neutralized. You have a clear route to the eastern ridge. Move now while you have cover." Williams watched through his scope as 18 Rangers rose from the riverbed like ghosts returning to life. They moved in textbook formation towards safety, carrying their wounded, leaving no one behind. Among them, Williams recognized faces from the mess hall, soldiers he'd shared stories with during quiet evenings. Thompson from Arkansas, who talked about his father's farm. Martinez from Texas, who carried his daughter's photo everywhere. Collins from Ohio, who made everyone laugh with his terrible jokes. The weight of what had just happened settled on Williams slowly. 4 precise shots, guided by a German soldier's mathematical precision, had returned 18 men to their families. The calculations, written in careful German handwriting, had bridged the gap between enemies and allies, between abstract warfare and human survival. As the Rangers reached safety and confirmed their successful extraction, Williams carefully removed the range cards from their waterproof pouch. The German advisor's work was a masterpiece of military precision. Not just the ballistic calculations, but the deeper understanding of how warfare operated in this specific terrain. The man had been a professional, a craftsman who took pride in perfect work. "You know what gets me?" Jenkins said as they began their own movement to a new position. "That German advisor probably never knew his range cards would be used in anger. He just did his job, calculated every variable, and went home. Now 18 Rangers are alive because some foreign soldier cared enough to be precise." Williams nodded, understanding flowing through him like mountain water. The white feather behind his helmet band caught the afternoon breeze as he thought about his grandmother's words concerning the interconnectedness of all things. Today, German engineering, American training, and Cherokee patience had combined to create something greater than the sum of their parts. The enemy hadn't been faceless today. They'd been precise, professional, worthy opponents who'd fought with skill and courage. And in defeating them with tools created by their own countrymen, Williams had glimpsed something profound about the nature of warfare and humanity. Do you think you'd cling to what you were taught back home, or to what your own eyes see in a place like this? Comment which side you'd lean toward, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. Later that evening, as Williams cleaned the PSG1 in the armory at Firebase Charlie, he found himself studying the German range cards with new appreciation. Every page revealed deeper layers of professional competence, wind patterns mapped across different seasons, temperature variations recorded at specific times of day, even notes about how local weather affected visibility and shot placement. Sergeant First Class Thompson approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "I owe you an apology, Williams, and I guess I owe that German bastard one too. Those calculations saved our people." Williams looked up from the rifle. "He wasn't a bastard, Thompson. He was a soldier doing his job, same as us. Still the enemy, though." "Yeah," Williams agreed quietly. "Still the enemy." But as Thompson walked away, Williams couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in his understanding. The German advisor had spent weeks alone in these mountains, methodically recording data that would make anyone, a more effective marksman. There had been no hatred in that work, no propaganda, just professional dedication to precision and excellence. Captain Rodriguez appeared at Williams's shoulder, studying the range cards. "Remarkable work. Our intelligence boys say the German Alpine units have been rotating advisors through here for months, mapping, calculating, preparing. This particular set of cards is signed H. Möller, Obergefreiter Gebirgsjäger. Mountain troops." Williams traced the signature with his finger. Heinrich Müller, perhaps. Hermann. A man with a name, a unit, maybe a family waiting for him somewhere in the Alps. "Captain, what happens to work like this? These calculations, I mean. Officially, they become part of our intelligence database. Help us understand enemy capabilities and methods." Rodriguez paused, then added more quietly, "Unofficially, they'll probably save more American lives before this war is over. That German's precision might keep protecting our people long after he's rotated home." That night, Williams lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The white feather rested on his chest, rising and falling with each breath. His grandmother's teachings about balance and interconnectedness seemed more relevant than ever. War had taught him to see enemies as targets, obstacles to overcome. But today, he'd been reminded that enemies could also be teachers, their skills and dedication transcending the artificial boundaries of nationality. Jenkins rolled over in the next bunk. "Can't sleep either, thinking about those calculations, about the man who made them, wondering if he knows what happened today." Williams considered the question. Somewhere, possibly, Obergefreiter H. Müller was writing reports, maybe preparing new range cards for a different mountain valley. Did he ever wonder how his work was being used? Did he think about the American soldiers who might benefit from his precision? "You ever think about going home, Jenkins? Trying to explain any of this?" Jenkins was quiet for a long moment. Who'd understand? "How do you tell people that sometimes the enemy's work saves your buddies' lives? That the other side has soldiers just as professional, just as dedicated as ours?" "You don't," Williams realized. "You just carry it." Outside, the mountain wind whistled through the firebase's defenses, carrying scents of pine and snow from the peaks above. Somewhere out there, other German advisors might be taking measurements, calculating trajectories, preparing the mathematical foundation for future engagements. Their work would be just as precise, just as professional, just as divorced from personal hatred. War was supposed to be about us versus them, good versus evil, clear lines and righteous purpose. But the PSG1 and its accompanying range cards had revealed a more complex truth, that excellence and dedication existed on both sides, that professional competence transcended national boundaries, that sometimes your life depended on an enemy's expertise. Williams touched the white feather, remembering his grandmother's voice. "Wisdom comes from unexpected directions, grandson. Sometimes our greatest teachers are those we least expect to learn from." Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, new opportunities to use the skills that had saved 18 lives today. But tonight, Williams carried the weight of a German soldier's careful calculations and the unsettling knowledge that precision and honor weren't uniquely American virtues. 3 days after the rescue, Williams discovered something that changed everything he thought he understood about the German range cards. While studying the ballistic data for an upcoming mission, he noticed faint pencil marks in the margins, notes written in English, not German. The handwriting was different from Obergefreiter Müller's careful German script. Someone had added corrections, adjustments, improvements to the original calculations, but these modifications were signed with initials, JH, Advisory Team 7. Williams felt his world tilt slightly off its axis. An American advisor had worked with the German data, refining it, making it more accurate. The calculations that had saved 18 Rangers weren't purely enemy work. They were the product of professional collaboration that transcended nationality. He found Captain Rodriguez in the communications bunker, encrypting reports for higher command. "Captain, these range cards, there are American modifications. Someone named J.H. from Advisory Team 7 worked on them." Rodriguez looked up from his typewriter, then glanced around to ensure privacy. "Classified information, Williams. But since those cards saved your mission..." He paused, making a decision. "Staff Sergeant James Harrison, attached to our NATO liaison unit. He worked with Muller for 2 weeks, sharing techniques, cross-referencing American and German ballistic data. An American helped perfect German targeting information. Professional soldiers sharing professional knowledge. The kind of collaboration that happens when you recognize competence regardless of uniform." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of weary pragmatism. "Wars end, Williams. Alliances shift. Sometimes today's enemy becomes tomorrow's ally. But professional respect between soldiers, that's constant." Williams sat down heavily, the implications washing over him. The precision that had saved American lives wasn't German or American. It was simply human excellence, the kind that emerged when skilled people worked together toward a common goal of professional perfection. Does Harrison know what happened? That his work was used in combat? He rotated home last month, probably has no idea his calculations helped save our people. Rodriguez returned to his typing, then added quietly, "Funny thing about war, Williams. We spend so much time learning to fight each other, we sometimes forget we're all just trying to do our jobs well." That afternoon, Williams found himself in the chapel, not praying exactly, but thinking. Chaplain Morrison, a soft-spoken man from Montana, noticed his troubled expression. "Heavy thoughts, son." Williams told him about the range cards, about Muller and Harrison, about the collaborative precision that had saved lives. Morrison listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. "You're discovering something that took me years to understand," Morrison said finally. "Evil exists in war, real evil. But so does excellence, dedication, professional pride. Sometimes the same person who's your enemy in combat is someone you'd respect greatly in peacetime. How do we reconcile that? How do we carry that knowledge?" Morrison smiled sadly, very carefully, and with the understanding that the world is more complicated than our training prepared us for. That evening, Williams wrote a letter to his sister Sarah, then tore it up. How could he explain that he'd succeeded in combat using calculations created by enemy soldiers and refined by American advisors? How could he describe the professional respect he felt for men who were, technically, trying to kill him and his fellow Rangers? Instead, he wrote about the mountains, about the weather, about missing her cooking. Safe topics that wouldn't reveal the complexity of his thoughts or the questions that now kept him awake. Jenkins found him on the perimeter that night, staring out at the dark mountains where other German observers might be taking measurements, calculating trajectories, preparing data with the same meticulous care as Obergefreiter Müller. "You're thinking about Harrison and Müller again." "Yeah, wondering if they knew their work would save American lives, if they cared." "Well, maybe that's the wrong question," Jenkins suggested. "Maybe the right question is, what do we do with this knowledge?" Williams touched the white feather, feeling its softness against his fingertips. His grandmother had taught him that wisdom often came disguised as confusion, that understanding sometimes required carrying contradictory truths without resolving them. Tonight, he carried the knowledge that his enemies were also his teachers, that their precision had saved his brothers in arms, and that war was far more complex than anyone had prepared him to understand. 2 months later, Williams received orders to rotate home. As he packed his gear at Firebase Charlie, he faced a decision about the German range cards. Officially, they were classified intelligence materials that should remain with the unit. Unofficially, they had become something more personal, a reminder that excellence and honor weren't bounded by nationality. Captain Rodriguez found him holding the cards one final time. "Keep them," he said simply. "Consider it educational material. Besides, Muller and Harrison's work deserves to be remembered." The flight home took 18 hours, crossing multiple time zones and carrying Williams from the mountain valleys of the war zone to the familiar landscapes of his childhood. But the internal journey was more complex, measured not in miles, but in the weight of memories he now carried. At the airport, Sarah waited with tears in her eyes and their mother's apple pie. The reunion was everything Williams had dreamed of during cold mountain nights, but something felt different. He found himself studying civilian faces, wondering about their precision, their dedication to their own forms of excellence. The postal worker who carefully sorted mail, the mechanic who precisely calibrated engines, the teacher who methodically planned lessons, all of them pursuing perfection in their own fields. "You seem different," Sarah observed over dinner. "Quieter, more thoughtful." Williams looked around the familiar kitchen where he'd grown up, trying to find words for experiences that defied easy explanation. How could he tell her about Obergefreiter Müller's mathematical precision, about Staff Sergeant Harrison's collaborative improvements, about the moment when enemy calculations had saved 18 American lives? "War changes people," he said finally. It was true, if incomplete. That night, alone in his childhood bedroom, Williams spread the German range cards on his desk. Under the lamp that had illuminated countless homework assignments, Müller and Harrison's collaborative work seemed even more remarkable. Two professionals from different armies had worked together to create something that transcended their technical allegiance to opposing sides. He began writing in a journal, recording not just what had happened, but what it meant. The precision of the German calculations, the collaborative improvements from the American advisor, the moment when enemy expertise had saved American lives, the complex truth that excellence knew no national boundaries. Months passed. Williams found work as a surveyor, using mathematical precision to map property boundaries and construction sites. The skills were similar to those he'd learned in the military, calculating angles, accounting for environmental factors, ensuring absolute accuracy. Sometimes, using his transit and measuring chains, he thought about Müller alone in the mountains, pursuing the same kind of meticulous precision. He never spoke publicly about the range cards or the collaborative work that had made them so effective. Some stories, he realized, were too complex for easy telling. In a world that preferred clear narratives about heroes and villains, the truth about professional respect, transcending national boundaries, was unwelcome. But privately, he carried the lesson forward. When training new surveyors, he emphasized precision above all else. When working with colleagues from different backgrounds, he looked for competence and dedication regardless of their origins. In small ways, he honored the memory of Muller and Harrison's collaboration. Years later, at a veterans' reunion, Jenkins asked him what he remembered most about their time at Firebase Charlie. Williams fingered the white feather he still kept in his wallet, now faded but still meaningful. "The morning mist," he said. "And the feeling of holding a rifle that had been zeroed by someone who cared enough to be perfect, even though he was supposed to be my enemy." Jenkins nodded, understanding. Some truths could only be shared between those who had lived them. The PSG1 firm site had proven that sometimes the right tool, in the right hands, at the right moment, could rewrite the ending of what seemed like an impossible story. But more than that, it had shown Williams that precision, honor, and professional dedication were universal human qualities that transcended the artificial boundaries of war. In the end, that was the story he carried home. Not the simple narrative of victory over enemies, but the complex truth that excellence and humanity could emerge in the most unexpected places, even in the careful calculations of those who were, technically, trying to kill him. If this story reminded you that even in the darkest times small acts of humanity still matter, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. How do you honor the enemy's excellence without betraying your own side's cause?